So I always encourage people to like find a passion. The book, How Google Works, they say passionate people don't use the P word. And that's great. Like find a demonstrated passion in something that you can just do and it doesn't feel like work and it's fun. And it's the kind of thing that can make you forget a long day or re-energize you with like the ability to get back into whatever's going on during your day job the next morning, even though it might be in the same room on the same table, but feel a little bit more energized about it because you've broken it up with something that's more tangible.
Well, tell me about your background, man. How'd you get into tech?
So I grew up in Australia, actually. I've been in Canada since 2004. And I've been born and raised in Adelaide, Australia. And I got out of high school. I wasn't a great student, didn't really enjoy school, but I loved computer sciences and found myself blitzing anything that was sort of scientifically inclined at school, and everything else sort of fell by the wayside and was just sort of a disturbance to my otherwise very important day. And then I took on college after high school in information systems in like the early 90s. And then I got out of that and I got into, once I was done with that, I got into sales actually in the packaging industry just to sort of get a job. And this is like, mid 90s. And I was good at it, but I hated it. Like I really didn't enjoy it. And I learned about, a little, I was very young still, but I learned about business and, relationships and how to sort of grow confidence in a space that I wasn't super confident with the subject matter, but I had to kind of learn about how to deal with the people. And then, long story short, I got fired from my first job, which after 4 years, because I was kind of just dialing it in, and I didn't, because I wasn't stimulated by it at all. So that kind of gave me a moment to sort of sit back and take stock of what was going on. And shortly after that, as everyone knows, mid and late 1990s, 98, 99, the internet became a thing, and it was new and emerging. My studies hadn't really prepared me for HTTP and the web, doing programming in C++ and that type of thing didn't really align. But fundamentally, I kind of had a real interest in that. So a very good friend of mine named Michael Potter and I started a business doing web development and like doing websites for people. And it was funny. He was a musician as well, interestingly enough, a fantastic guitar, like a session guitar player, fantastically talented man, and a really good person. And he and I kind of set about working out how to make the internet a business for just small businesses. And we started a small business. We started in his sort of basement office, and then we moved out into a little studio. And we got really good. We picked up, I built an e-commerce platform for a national sports retailer in the year 2000. And it was awful. I go back and think about it now, like by today's standards, it was just terrible. But I did that. And I got a great education in like the reality of putting this stuff together. We built an online auction catalog management system for a government surplus auction house, where the core, you'll love this, the driving KPI was reduction in photocopying costs. It wasn't about anything else, because people would show up to the auction on auction day and they would put their hand out for an inch thick auction catalog that these guys would have to crank out of their printer. And they said, hey, most people have a computer at home, have access to the internet. What if they could go and view our catalog online, hand pick the stuff they were interested in and print their own catalog and bring it in, just the stuff they were interested in. And they saved like $45,000 a year in photocopying costs. And that made like the Financial Review, which is like the Wall Street Journal in Australia. And we got an article in the Financial Review about how we helped this auction house reduce printing costs. And again, I think, so it's really interesting by today's standards, when we think about the KPIs and and the metrics driving digital business today and how different they are. But still, there were metrics. There was a measurement. There was a reason for doing it back then, and it was super fun. And I remember selling the guy on the vision of that thing, and then on the way home, stopping to buy ASP in a Nutshell by O'Reilly, which is the book that was going to teach me how to do everything I just promised this guy I was going to do for him. And then we went back to the studio, took our ties off, and got to work.
That kind of reminds me of how you said that you got like a write-up in the Wall Street Journal about you improving this strange KPI. I actually saw, it was like last year, but a Wall Street Journal article on how Domino's Pizza like outperformed every tech stock because of the digital transformation that they went through as a company. And like the efficiencies that this pizza shop got made their stock do better than like every tech company that year.
Yeah.
It's
a driving force. I mean, try to name an industry or a business that's not being driven by digitization and digital transformation, right? And you'd be hard pressed, I think, to find one that's worthy of a conversation that isn't directly connected to what's going on in the digital world and analytics and the relative inexpensive compute power today. It's driving so many, it's driving so much of our world for sure.
So the first company you were at or that you founded was basically like an agency for like building
it was an
whatever
agency
needed building.
Right. And this is where I reflect on that. I'm like, man, if I could have a do-over there, it would have been different, because it was funny. It wasn't about the money. It was about learning how to do things. So we built a website and a scheduling calendar system for a gym. They didn't pay us money, but we got access to the gym for free. So we worked out every day. So we did so much stuff on barter and contra and deals. I drove a beautiful Honda Prelude at the time because we did a chain of Honda dealerships. We did their website for them. We got them into the internet for the very first time. But it was kind of right around the .com bubble, but in Australia, we were kind of insulated from that. It wasn't the same as it was out west in North America at the time. There was like hesitation and a little bit of it was this thing happening in the US, but in Australia, it was we were behind the curve a little bit. So people said, yeah, I'm interested in getting a website. It was more like having a digital brochure, like the kind of thing that you would otherwise have on your coffee table. That's what people wanted. And we brought some dynamism to that conversation and said, well, have you thought about doing this or adding this feature or this functionality? And that got people interested in talking to us, but the revenues weren't huge. There wasn't a lot on the line if things went sideways, not like today, right? Nothing we did was mission critical. It was just interesting. And I learned a lot about how things work. Actually, today, it's funny when I'm interviewing people and I've interviewed no fewer than 600-700 people in my career for different roles of different levels of technical acumen. And oftentimes I'll ask somebody in an interview to explain to me how the internet works. Just explain it to me in your own words. And it's funny how many people who are looking for jobs in the digital realm can't do that. They can't give you a cogent description on how the internet works. And that's because not a lot of people came up through the grassroots where there weren't web platforms to do a thing, or there weren't frameworks developed. You had to do it all from scratch. And doing it from scratch meant you got down a few layers and you actually understand how things come together. And that's what's really helped me in my career. Having this foundational understanding of how things work has helped me get to where I am today, even though the people that I surround myself with now are far superior to me in terms of their skills and capabilities and whatever it is that they do. Having that kind of working knowledge from the grassroots of the internet has really helped me kind of stay relevant and current,
That's really cool. Yeah, just how the internet actually works isn't something that I ever really put that much thought into until we actually had Tim Berners-Lee, inventor of the web, on the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah.
And Then on a later episode, we had one of the co-founders of Stellar, the cryptocurrency payment network.
Yep. Yeah, I'm familiar. Yeah.
And Joel's doing that interview, and he brought up that we just had the inventor of the internet on the podcast. And the guy who founded Stellar was like, no, you didn't. He invented the web. And then he went through like a very detailed explanation of the internet and all the layers.
Yeah. The World Wide Web and the internet, two very different things, right? It's all function of protocol. And this is the stuff, and it's funny, depending on who the person is, when you're interviewing them and you ask them that question, the look of death kind of washes over their face. But it's similar to, and again, we don't expect people to be network engineers, but I wouldn't take my car to a mechanic that a working explanation of an internal combustion engine, right? And I think there's a lot to be said for that. Again, interfaces and platforms, again, have made very complicated stuff kind of trivial. And if you want to be in the agency world or the advanced analytics world or somewhere where you're claiming to be able to come in and solve problems, then I think you need more than just an interface working knowledge of what's going on if you want to be credible in those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Like troubleshooting requires such a further depth of knowledge than
absolutely
like operating something. But so tell me about where you're at today.
Right.
Is it DAC Group or DAC Group? How do you?
It's DAC. It's an initialism, not an acronym. So I like to educate people on the differences of those, just because it's a fun little grammatical trivia. So DAC Group, and I've been fortunate enough to be with the agency since 2008, when I was introduced to Norm, the CEO, and through my network, and sort of came on as one of the instigators of sort of our own digital transformation. How were we going to go from being a long, successful Yellow Pages advertiser, Yellow Pages agency, and then pivot to digital. And he had the foresight to understand, in the early 2000s, that the Yellow Pages medium was going away rapidly and the internet was going to usurp that entire position. And then sure enough, it did. And, all the competitors we had when I joined the agency are all gone. And, we persist and have grown from strength to strength and become, quite a player in the performance digital marketing space. And then more recently, we've taken our analytics practice that I established probably back in 2011 or 12. We got our first I was the web analyst until I wasn't. And then we got somebody in to do a better job than me and grew it from there. And we've grown that into quite a practice. And that's sort of where the Proove Intelligence brand has come from, where we've established inside DAC as a dedicated analytics center of excellence, a secondary brand. And we focus purely on advanced analytics, data science, integrated business intelligence, and marketing technology that really drives a lot of the measurement that goes on in the digital business. And so we act as sort of the internal analytics department for DAC and every client that we touch. Plus, we'd work exclusively with other clients as an analytics service provider directly. And that gives us access to all kinds of experiences and really exciting project work that we get to have a real influence on the way those businesses use their data.
Well, DAC's like always been ahead of the curve on analytics, right? Weren't you guys first to do like tracking on how those Yellow Pages ads performed?
Right. Yeah. So we did, we call it RCF, remote call forwarding, which is really just an IP based phone number. Or back then it wasn't. It was actually done on the PSTN, where they would switch a phone number from one to the other. So we would, something as trivial as putting a different phone number in a Yellow Pages ad than you have as your main phone number, so that you can track calls to that number and attribute them to your investment in the Yellow Pages. It sounds like laughably trivial by today's standards, but that was real revolutionary stuff back in the day that helped bring some sort of tangible ROI to the investment people were having in the directory space. As you fast forward now, call tracking it's a whole industry, right? And there are a lot of players. We partner with a few very big ones, what you can do with the telephone, especially with the mobile revolution, it's quite fascinating how you can get really detailed attribution for all types of marketing activities using the telephone, either through IP-based communication or traditional telephony. But yeah, it's fun. Write down keyword level stuff and personalized events that can help you understand what triggered people to actually place that phone call or engage with you, all using the phone. It's really a fascinating space.
Yeah, that's really cool. I remember I also read that you guys were putting QR codes in yellow pages, like way before it was
way before COVID, way before everybody. I'm telling you, man, I was pro QR code for the longest time, and I was told often that it's stupid and it's a waste. But I'm telling you, I think they're here to stay now. That's for sure. But yeah, we actually did. We ran a few yellow pages ads back in the day. That when mobile was starting to get its hold. Right around the first iPhone and second iPhone generations, where we popped a QR code that could link you out to a landing page that we could then directly attribute to that Yellow Pages ad again. And again, did we get a ton of traffic? Nope. Was that a really meaningful contribution? Did it save the Yellow Pages? It sure didn't, because that's long gone now, and we're certainly onto much more sophisticated things. But it was definitely, it's a good representation of kind of who we are organizationally, is like doing interesting new things to try to find if there's a way to sort of crack the code or break the mold a little bit to give meaning to the effort that we're doing, because ultimately that's what our clients care about. They care very much about, what have you done for me lately? What is the return going to be on this thing? And are the decisions you're making the right ones? And we want to be able to prove that. And if we're wrong, then we want to know, and we want to move on to something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people that are in first definitely get the highest returns on any new trend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But so tell me, what is like the problem that companies are having that makes them go to you today? And that they're looking for a solution. Yeah,
and I'll probably talk to you about that, I think, more in terms of sort of the Proove Intelligence brand, because that's really where personally I see, the most exciting part of our business right now, and the big opportunity, not only for us organizationally, but for the clients that we're working with, and the stories that we have to tell. I think people getting their head around, everyone's been talking about, data activation. We've got to use our business data, our historic business data, to help make tomorrow's decisions, right? I have this slide that I put into some of my presentations that says, most companies use their data the way a drunk person uses a lamppost. And that is to say, for support rather than illumination, right? That's the quote. So, and I think when you break that down, anybody can get any data set and pivot it to tell a story that makes whatever decision they made last week seem plausible, right? It's like, hey, we did this thing and look, it ain't so bad, right? But in order to take that same data set and help it give you an idea or to make a better decision for what happens tomorrow and sort of illuminate a path forward, I think that's where a lot of organizations are struggling right now, is to bring all of that information together and have the technical acumen to be able to do that, but also the business discipline to be able to say, okay, we've been relying on Bob for 20 years to help us make decision X and Y. And now we've got Bob and all of his experience, which is unbelievably valuable, but we've got all this data that also contributes to the decision-making process. And we should find a way to incorporate that and trust it and test it appropriately and help improve things that way. And I think that's where we're finding a lot of traction, is helping people kind of bring that together.
It sounds like it requires a really humble executive team that is like, they're able to throw away what they think or their hunches on a moment's notice if the data says something's wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
do you have to deal with like egos a lot within your clients?
Well, not so much egos. It's it's trust. I think the number one thing that's derailed projects for us and our clients' opportunity, even people we don't work with, prospects that we might talk to and not ultimately work with, I think the number one thing that derails them is trust. They don't believe that the signals that we're relying on are either accurate or complete or comprehensive enough to tell the full story. And sometimes that just gets in the way. And I think the trust is a derivative of maybe just a lack of understanding. Like data did nothing, there's not guarantee. The data science is not about guaranteeing. It's got the word science in it, for God's sake. Like science is iterative and controlled and arduous and exhaustive. It's not magic. It's something that needs to be worked at and understood correctly, and having the right people at the table that understand the nuance. I think I believe in this thing called the conscious competence scale. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but it's about anyone that learns anything goes through the 4 stages of conscious competence, right? And I talk about this a lot with my team and with other people I interface with. And I think that critical one of being consciously incompetent is so critical. Like being aware of what you don't know and inviting people around that do, and then finding your way to bridge to that conscious competence where you've learned a new thing, but you're applying yourself to that new thing and you want to go and explore that. And sometimes I find organizations and certain executives and certain people who are in positions of power and trying to navigate this complicated new world, they might not be so willing to be consciously incompetent and say, hey, you know what? This is a space I don't understand. This is a space that's new to me. I know it's important and I want to make sure I get there. And I think that is a huge limiting factor.
So I want to, we're talking really broadly. I want to break it down to like practicality. Do you have like any cool case studies that you can share or about engagements where your data analytics were able to provide a path forward that the company followed?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That was kind of it.
Okay. Yeah, I do. So there's a retailer that jumps to mind, a fashion accessories retailer. So this retailer we've been working with for under the DAC banner for a number of years, doing their media and their marketing. And they actually had a data science team that worked on, and most companies do have a data science team now, big company, sizable organizations, and there's Purdue grads in there. And I remember actually before one of the meetings, almost like, I'm not a Purdue grad of data science at all. And so I was a little intimidated actually before I met these people. But as soon as I met them, I'm like, now I understand why they need us. I knew right away because of all their academic, of all their capabilities and academic skill, they really didn't know how to connect what they were doing into sort of material business outcomes that were going to influence the bottom line of this company. They knew how to do a regression model all day long, right? Or any number of other models they could do, but they didn't really know how to carry the conversation through to how it could influence the business. And that's where we really stepped in to help. So we were able to work with this brand to look at their they had a great customer data platform. We took a pass at that. It was a little too generic. So we went a layer deeper and we pulled every transaction from every point of sale system they had made in the last 10 years and hundreds of millions of rows of data. And our team got to sort of cleaning this and engineering features within this data that were meaningful to the business. And ultimately, we created customer profiles or customer segments rather than going through this sort of aspirational persona development thing, using market research to say who are the different kinds of customers and who are the different types of people and how are they going to interact with your brand and how are they going to respond to your message. We said, you've got 10 years of actual stuff going on here. And here's what it tells us about your customer base in excruciating detail. And we were able to build out these personas that they were extremely excited to see. The data science team were very excited. I mean, we took them through the detail, the math of it all, how we arrived where we arrived. But the executive team and the marketing team, we went in and presented this, and there was a huge boardroom full of people from product development and from real estate for their and from merchandising, from all corners of the business. They brought them in to hear this thing, because what we had to say kind of infiltrated the inner workings of their business. And these persona segments that we created for them became sort of staples in their internal taxonomy. So when they were developing a new product, they were developing it for Maria. Why? Because it was red and it was small, and it was going to go into this part of the world, part of the country first, geographically. They re-merchandised some of their retail stores based on our findings to put different color palettes into different stores primarily, because they knew that the data suggested that the people in that particular area were more susceptible to a blue color than a red color. They launched purple products on a Thursday rather than a Tuesday. Like, these things actually happened downstream from the work that we did. And they were able to see sort of measurable upticks in the key performance indicators that mattered to their business through the application of the insights and the findings from the work that we did. So that's one that we still work with this company today, and we do a variety of different things for them. But this model that we built and these, this process for understanding the transaction data and categorizing their customers and learning from them is persistent to this day. So it's very interesting to see how that's evolved.
That's really cool. Yeah, because I know like traditional marketing segmentation you do with whatever census data or Gartner data that you buy or whatever, but that's just kind of a blurry outline of what you could be using if you had 10 years of your own data.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, if you've got that asset, like, put it to use, like, bring it together. Like, we also actually, it's funny you say that, like the third party and the external data, also super relevant, because from an acquisition point of view, if I'm looking to grow my customer base and I want to find more people that look like this customer group, or I want to find more people in this part of the country that has these socioeconomic factors that affect it, then I need to look beyond my own walls to get insight and relevance and information from other sources. So we actually used our data and our segments that we created became the basis for third-party research. So we put real-world descriptors around them, and we went and found those people in all of these other data subscriptions that we have, and we built sort of detailed personas on top of this data-driven stuff for the marketing group, so that they could understand them. But internally, like, the understanding of the actual customers based on their actual business variables and features, that was good enough for the internal teams to do what they needed to do. So it really did create this sort of springboard into various parts of the organization. And again, that's something that we've referred to it. We've leveraged similar tactics and the techniques that we developed in that engagement for other clients. And again, that's just part of the value that we try to offer, is that we're never starting from scratch with anything that we're doing ever. We're never starting from zero. Whereas some companies that might hire a data scientist and try to go it alone, they're kind of starting from the ground floor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about the Proove Intelligence Outcome Accelerator, just because I saw it and it sounds like a really cool name. I don't want to know what it is.
Yeah, so actually that's a really interesting, that's something that we're actually reframing. So what that was, it's really about, remember the point I made earlier about trust in terms of hamstringing a data project. People don't trust the data. They're not going to do anything with it. They're not going to want to do anything. And I think that Outcome Accelerator was our sort of, it started off as sort of an operating framework where we wanted to execute every project through these sort of 4 categories. And it's sort of evolved more to an ethos, because as our portfolio has broadened and the type of work that we're doing, it's become sort of, a thing that we hang on the wall. And it means that it doesn't matter what we're doing, whether we're doing a data pipeline thing for an integrated dashboard, whether we're doing a complicated engineering and data science project like the one I just explained, or whether we're deploying a analytics platform and a marketing technology stack to help, add to the data set for a particular customer. That these sort of 4 things that we call analytics imperatives have to be at the forefront all the time. And they are trust, meaning you have to be able to believe that the data is going to be accurate, and we need to do what we need to do to let everybody know that it's accurate. The second one is perception. Data and analytics is a highly cognitive space. It can sometimes blind people that don't love it, and they just glaze over. So we have to make it perceptive, right? We need to make sure that people understand and perceive what we're talking about. So communicating at different levels, making sure people are really enrolled in what we're doing and not just nodding along blindly. So perception is this sort of second pillar of our accelerator. The third one is intelligence. So we have to use, state-of-the-art methods and approaches to actually doing the work. So great machine learning tools, great engineering and statistical modeling methodology that really gives scientific rigor to what we're doing. And then ultimately, the last imperative is influence, we call it. And that really is about, do we know what we're going to change in the business when we're all done? Because if we're just doing all of these great reports and doing all this great analysis, it's just going to become a very expensive spreadsheet at the end of the day. And so we have to have a plan from the beginning about how are we going to use this to influence the business and ultimately drive some sort of measurable outcome that's going to be meaningful to the people that we're working with. And we found from our experience that if we check those 4 boxes, those 4 imperatives are always in the conversation, then we have tremendous success. We get everybody enrolled, we move things forward, we do good work, and everyone's happy. So trust, perception, intelligence, and influence are those sort of 4 imperatives that we focus on.
That's really cool. That's did you pull those up right when I asked that question? You were typing a little bit.
Yeah, you know what? I was just making sure I got them correct in the right order, because sometimes I'll trip over that, and I want to make sure that we get those, that we get them in the right order, the right way. But yeah, they're and again, like I said, we've evolved that a little bit. We used to have a little bit more. Last year, we had a more wordy explanation for that, and we've simplified it to those 4 imperatives. And that's what I was just double checking that I had the language right, because I'm so used to the original version of that. But people really respond to that, and they recognize the difference between, vendors that come in and say, "Hey, my platform's going to solve all your data problems," because they want you to implement something and they think that that'll be it, to like an agency or a analytics partner like us that wants to work at the table and make sure that we're going to move things forward appropriately and be accountable for the outcome. Ultimately, that's what we're trying to sell our clients, is a number, an improvement of a number over time. That's what we're selling them. The work is just the medium to get us there, but the work itself doesn't have value.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that DAC Group also has a podcast. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. So my very good friends and brilliant colleagues, Nasser Salul, who runs our strategy and insights group, and and Jenna Watson, who runs our media department, which is a massive operation, and she's awesome at that. The 3 of us get together once a month and pick a topic that's sort of relevant to what we're feeling in our industry, in our business, and we'll sort of go deep on that, and we'll bring guests in from time to time. It's called Inside the Funnel. We're in our sort of 2nd full year of that now, and we're having a lot of fun doing that. And sometimes the topics are laid out well ahead of time, and we research them. Whereas the one I think we did in December, we said we should do a "what do we think is going to happen next year" episode, and then an hour later we jumped on and recorded it, and it was actually one of the better ones because it was super natural and unscripted. It was like the first time we'd had a conversation about it. We did one about the Metaverse as well.
Oh, nice.
Similar similar type of thing where it was literally the first time the three of us had had a conversation about that topic since Facebook rebranded and everything happened. So we captured our kind of initial thoughts and reactions and idiosyncrasies without any rehearsal whatsoever. And it was actually a lot of fun. So yeah, that's definitely something we enjoy doing.
That's awesome. So how do you define like what the metaverse is going to be like? Because I feel like there's such a spectrum between like some cheesy Sims like world where we have avatars that we're moving around with our mouse, or like an AR on top of the real world. I don't know, like how do you define it? How do you think it will look when it takes off, or if it takes off?
Well, there's a couple of things. And again, if anyone's interested in this, I would invite them to listen to our Inside the Funnel episode on the metaverse, because we do cover a lot of those topics. But I think in a nutshell, there's a couple of things that I would say to that. One, I think people need to understand that the metaverse is a concept rather than a construct. So it's not one organization that will have, it's a metaverse. There will be a metaverse, and it will be interoperable, and it will run largely on decentralized sort of Web3 computing, which will democratize, the access and the ownership and the governance and even the growth of that platform. I think, and that's where I think Facebook's announcement confused a lot of people, because they were like, "Oh, Facebook owns the metaverse." Although that's not true at all. Like they're just doing a bit of a land grab. They were getting in early, trying to become the Kleenex of the metaverse, right? So tissues are tissues, but everyone calls them Kleenex because of great branding and great timing. And I think there's something to be said for what's going on there. But fundamentally, Nasser made a really interesting point that I've reflected on, that he borrowed some readings from, I can't remember who it was, but we'll have to look it up. But basically saying that there needs to be a reason. People play, my kids come down and mess with the settings on my computer here because they want to play Fortnite. And they get on and they immerse themselves in this thing, but there's a reason for doing it. People play Minecraft because there's a reason for doing it. Minecraft became so much more than it was ever developed to be, right? It was just originally a game, but it's become a computer programming platform and a socializing platform and a challenge thing and a whole sub-genre of YouTube and Twitch streaming and entertainment. And it was just meant to be a game. But all of those things existed and persisted because there's a reason everyone does it. And I think saying that the metaverse will exist simply because technology will allow it to is a step below what the reason for people to actually engage with it is going to be. And I think when we look at some of the monetization objects that are working in that space at the moment with NFTs and cryptocurrencies and that whole Web3 space, I think is going to drive some of the reason for people to be in there. So NFTs to a normal person are a speculative investment vehicle at the moment, at best, I think. Whereas in a metaverse where it gives you access to some experience or some opportunity to be a representative of some community, I think that's where the reason for them existing is going to land with more people once it can be put into that sort of context. So I do think it's going to happen. It's a when rather than an if. We actually spoke a lot about the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality and how the metaverse has a role in both. And I think that distinction is lost on some people as well. The virtual reality is that real. I need a reason. I got to put on an Oculus headset and cut myself off from the world like Ready Player One style. And I need a reason to do that. Like, why am I doing that? Is it for entertainment? Is it for what? I need to understand that. But augmented reality is something where I can absolutely see the metaverse and some overlay to the real world. We talked about, as media buyers, we're always looking for new mediums and channels and ad unit opportunities to get higher performance, or fallow ground where maybe the demand is low, so they're cheap, relatively speaking. But so we'll jump on it early. But think about, in the grocery store with your Google Glass on, which maybe the new version of that wasn't not going to be such a failure. And as you're walking down the grocery aisle, your shopping list and your preferences are preloaded against your account connected to your glass overlay display. And as you look towards a product, you're presented with a contextual offer for that product that might be holographically imposed over the real thing that you can claim in real time in the store, right? And if that's not like an absolute layup for this concept of like making the metaverse have purpose in the real world and giving a reason for people to engage with it, then I don't know what is. But I really think that that's an exciting opportunity for brands that, want to, find their place in this emerging space in a way that's going to be meaningful to them in the real world.
Yeah. And as someone that's like interested in marketing and marketing tech, that's really exciting. But also as a consumer that walks around the world we live in, it's like I have this nightmare vision of ads surrounding me in physical space.
Mm-hmm.
Like
right.
That sounds terrible if
it
that's
does,
where
right.
it goes.
But think about that. But then that's where, the irony is so much of this is happening at the very same time that massive reductions to the accessibility of data are being imposed through enhanced privacy laws and privacy legislation. The thing you just mentioned being a real threat. Third-party cookies and third-party data signals are going away next year sometime, right? Mm-hmm. So anybody that's relying on data being augmented from other partners and third-party people, they're going to have to rethink the way that they're putting their profiles and their data sets together. All of what we're trying to build here is happening when all of that stuff is on the decline. So think about what the actual application of that would be like. You would have to have control, right? For this to work, you would have to be able to say, I'm Adam and I'm not interested in being overwhelmed with this, but I am interested in this, this, and this only. And then that's all you should receive, right? Whereas other people, because I'm a marketer and a data guy, I'm the guy that clicks allow on my phone all the time. When my app says, this app would like to track you across that, I'm like, yeah, sure, track me. I don't care. Go, track, yes. Because I don't know, I'm like, I know what I'm giving up and I know that the utility that it offers me is worth it, right? And I'm fine with it. So I'd probably have a different experience than you will. And that's what makes it so awesome, is that, these rules are being put in place to protect people like you and I, while this technology erupts around us. When those two things come together, I think it could be a really high utility, low impact, not overly invasive world if it's all implemented properly. And I'm sure it won't be at some point, but some of it will, I'm super excited. 10 years from now, the conversations we're going to have are going to make this exchange seem a pedestrian, I believe. Right.
I get a lot of my context and inspiration for stuff just from other episodes of this podcast, because this is kind of my everyday world. Mm-hmm. And recently we had on this company called Spot that they work with companies to reduce their cloud costs by like allocating their cloud compute to happen at times where it's cheaper for that to happen. Sure. And
like off-peak electricity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they can cut costs by like 80 to 90%. It sounded really cool, but their CTO Kevin was saying when Joel and him were talking about leadership, that one of the hardest parts about moving into executive leadership is being hands off, especially when you've been an individual contributor before. And So I wanted to hear if you had any advice for being hands-off and working through people rather than through your fingertips.
And it's funny that you asked me that question, and we didn't set this up ahead, and I was not prepared for it, but I had this exact conversation with somebody just this morning about like the challenge with that. I think I'm a unique version of that. Maybe. It's a very interesting topic. I've always been pretty good at all of this stuff, but I've never been like unbelievably the best in the room at any of it, if that makes sense, right? I've always had like a natural affinity for computing and databases and applications and networks and all the stuff that makes everything we're talking about here today work. Because my career path has put me in a position where I've had to just work it out. I had formal training that was kind of tangentially relevant to what we do today, but it was old and not really there. And then I've had to sort of make my way through experiences and listening and learning. And so I've never really, while I've often felt like, people are looking at me to solve the problem, I never felt like, this is the thing I do. So when I stop doing it, I'm going to feel this detachment from it. I felt like I kind of do all of it. And then I quickly learned that having a foundational understanding, like we discussed earlier, was a powerful asset, because then I could identify who the real champions were, who's really good at this, right? And I could tell right away if they were excellent at it. And I would put both hands on them as quickly as possible and get them close to me so that I could represent better outcomes. I could do better work if I was surrounded by people who were way better at stuff than I was. So I actually found it easier and kind of a natural evolution to get into the leadership and management of this stuff rather than the actual doing. So the challenge I had with that is maintaining a feeling of relevance. As the people around me got smarter, I had a man working for me a couple of years ago who had a PhD in distributed systems. I mean, talk about a niche discipline. The dude was just an absolute wizard when it came to distributed computing, and we needed his skills for a very particular thing. And I found myself in a conversation with him one time where we started to debate an approach to something, and I immediately felt like, what the hell are you doing? You have nothing to offer in this conversation. But I helped the guy in the moment, because I helped him see the consequences of what we were trying to do from a position where he had no experience about like the way a executive at our client that we were talking about would perceive what we were doing didn't factor into his decision-making at all initially, but then it did. And then that helped us find a better outcome. So I was able to kind of bring that experience in. So I've personally found it easier than others I've spoken to sort of be the hands-off rope puller. The problem is I only get called when there's a problem to solve. I'm never really in the solution. Although just the last couple of days, we just launched a big project yesterday, and I spent a great deal of time yesterday actually hands-on helping people solve a thing, because it's something that I'm particularly experienced at. So that was fine, and I loved it because I got to get my hands dirty. But in the main, I think this is a decision a lot of people who are in this space and who strive to be leaders need to sort of reconcile in their own mind. Are you willing to not be the guy or the girl anymore and back away from that in order to make room for people who are going to be better than you? They're going to be freshly educated with curriculum that is representative of a more modern time. They're going to bring that academic knowledge and capability and maybe enthusiasm to the table that you're not going to have. And then your job is going to be to nurture that and apply what they can't learn at school. And that's how you help them sort of move forward. So it's a really good question, and a thing that we, in the technical space, we navigate that all the time. And I've seen tremendous engineers with terrific talent just fail flat when you put a team underneath them. And then you quickly back that up and say, you just keep being you in the corner and keep doing great work, and we'll take care of all of this other people's stuff. And you just keep churning out amazing product. And then I've seen mediocre engineers and developers or technical people really thrive when they're in a position where they can get their arms around a group of people and inspire a group of people to a common goal. And my job is to try to work out who's who and which way is everyone going and how best can we, put everyone in the position to succeed the most.
Do you have any like tips for getting out of like a mental slump? Like every day just slowly starts to feel like a slog. And, if you just keep working every day and not, get any space to just step away, it's probably going to continue. How do you create healthy boundaries and space from work in order to get back to normal and back to your A game? Yeah,
look at what's happened the last 2 years. Like everybody has invited their work into their home. Doesn't matter what you do. Like we've invited the erasure, the blurring of those lines through necessity initially, and now just through sort of repetitive behavior. Listen, you get to a certain level, your phone's kind of on all the time and you hear a ding and you can't not look because you just care. You're invested in the outcome of what's going on at work. It's not just a paycheck. So, that's going to happen for people, for a lot of people. But, personally, I find, I deal in the intangible a lot. When we build a platform, we launch it and it works and you click the thing and the thing does what it's supposed to, or we run the model and we get great outcomes and then we make decisions on those outcomes and we get better results. It's all good and real, but you can't touch it and you can't stick it on a shelf and you can't you can't work with it the same way. So I actually personally find sort of escape in like tangible technical things. So, my home office here doubles as my sort of project hobby room. And as I look around the room, I'm surrounded by, microcontrollers and electronics and soldering stations and a laser cutter and a 3D printer and a plotter, and a big mess actually, as I now look around. And that's the stuff that, it exercises the same part of my brain that solving a data modeling problem solves. But there's a physical outcome at the end of it and the thing works. Or the idea that I had, I'll design it on CAD and then I'll print it on my 3D printer and I'll put it into action wherever I needed the solution and I'll see it and I get a tremendous sense of gratification from that. So I always encourage people to like find a passion. The book, How Google Works, they say passionate people don't use the P word. And that's great. Like find a demonstrated passion in something that you can just do and it doesn't feel like work and it's fun. And it's the kind of thing that can make you forget a long day or re-energize you with like the ability to get back into whatever's going on during your day job the next morning, even though it might be in the same room on the same table, but feel a little bit more energized about it because you've broken it up with something that's more tangible than what you normally do. Actually, I got a chance when we did a series of sort of the executive team at DAC, we put together a series of like Zoom things to just sort of, somebody did a cooking thing and I did a CAD modeling thing, right? We don't do that at work, but people were interested in it. So we all got in front of a bunch of people, got on thing, and I taught them how to do the basic principles of doing CAD modeling to design something on the computer in 3D. And then talked about the workflow to bringing that to life on a 3D printer and stuff. And people were just fascinated by that and interested in it. And, but some people just don't know how to get started with anything like that. And I find that, trying to be a resource for those people to help them sort of get started is another part of the job sometimes. But I don't know. Hopefully we'll get back to some delineation between what is home and what is work in a more normal setting soon. And then that will make the answer to that question much easier to answer, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. That is the big challenge, sitting at the same desk before and after hours,
absolutely.
Before, during, and after.
Yeah.
What is a piece of advice you received like early on in your career that has just continued to serve you well throughout?
I think, there's so much. I mean, if I might, our CEO, Norm, and I, we talk frequently business and personal and development, and very similar to the conversation we're having today. And he and I, our relationship has evolved and developed over 13 years, as you could imagine. He's taught me a tremendous amount about leadership and about, managing my own personal blind spots. I think that's when you're used to being kind of the jack of all trades and the guy that can get it all done. It's back to that conscious competence thing, being okay to say that this thing that we're dealing with, or this thing that's been put in front of me, is not my forte, and I don't have a lot to draw from on it. So I'm going to say I need help. I'm going to say I really need somebody who knows more about this to come in and help me do it. When it's inside my field of expertise to do with technology or technical development or data, I never really had a hard time saying, I don't understand about that, but I know that, Bill does or Jason does or whomever, so I can bring them in. But when it was about a topic where I wasn't as confident, I often resisted getting help because I felt that I had to work it out just like I've worked everything else out. And I think running up against some of the consequences of me doing that, and then hearing the feedback and saying, actually, maybe you do need to sort of stop and listen and look elsewhere for input on those things that you're maybe not quite as good at. I think that served me well. It was tough to hear at the time. And then, of course, you absorb that and you then put it into practice and you see the results and you say, actually, that was pretty good. That's a pretty good outcome this time. I should use that next time. And then it starts to become a natural behavior. And then I start to hear myself giving that advice to people who are looking to me for guidance as well now, and trying to help them through the same sort of transformation. So, without giving Norm too much of a big head, if he happens to listen to this, I would say that, having that experience with a man like him, with his experiences, and then, being able to reflect on that now is probably the strongest piece of advice that I find myself going back to more often than anything else.
That's awesome, man. Well, before we call it on the day, anything you want to draw some extra attention to, shout out at DAC or Proove Intelligence?
No, just again, it's just we are. I've worked a variety of different places over the last 25 years, and I think what keeps me for 13 years at a place like DAC, amidst this space, there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of things going on in a space like this, and if you were interested, you could jump around and get all sorts of experiences. Is that there's a level of skill and competence and camaraderie between the people that we work with that we get to bundle up and drop into the boardrooms that we sit in with the clients that we work with and have really meaningful impact. And I think that's, for anyone that's in this space looking for, digital marketing partners and looking for support with analytics, there's so many people you could go to. There's such a crowded space. You can go on Upwork or Fiverr and find independent contractors that are probably very talented. You could find massive holding company firms or consulting companies to come and work with you. But when you look at an organization like ours, there's this harder to define element that we bring into the room that is just helping us crush it. We're killing results across the board in so many different verticals. And that has a lot to do with the tenure and the personalities of the people that sort of show up when we do the work. And the core team that I've seen grow and change, and people come and people go, but there's this core nucleus of talent and commitment to what we're doing that has just persisted. And it's a really powerful asset. And I think that, the people that have worked with us for as long as they have would agree. So I urge anybody who's in that space to reach out to us and, if for no other reason, just to have a conversation about what's going on in your business and to see if there's a fit. And often there isn't, and sometimes there is. And either way, we're good people, and we really, really like talking about this stuff.